We have the pleasure of speaking to Deacon Dave Scheuer, who is a deacon in the Diocese of Green Bay. Now, Deacon, it's such a pleasure to have you with us on the Truth Pop podcast because it's very relatable for people going to Sunday Mass. They have their young children with them and they're trying to keep them quiet. And then there's so many distractions when you look around, and then you're just thinking about, oh, what am I going to have for lunch later on today? So many things at Mass that are stealing away our attention from the true gift of our Catholic faith, the source and summit of the Eucharist. And I believe that your experience of what you encountered at Mass can really change our hearts and help us to reflect more deeply on what we could be missing out on. So let's start from the very beginning, Deacon. It
Okay,
all happened with your little son, who you yourself were trying to keep quiet.
right. My son John, he was probably about 2.5 years old, and like every parent, a set of parents, whatever the case may be, we struggled. We struggled with him at Mass, just trying to keep him settled down, keep him quiet. He's one of those kids who is all over in the pew, always talking. He still talks a lot, and he actually escaped the pew on quite a few occasions where we had to chase him up the aisle and grab him and bring him back to the pew. So we were always looking for ways to settle him down. And, we tried the usual, the Ziploc bag of Cheerios and the juice in a sippy cup and, some books and little, Hot Wheels cars to play with, all that, all that kind of stuff that parents typically do. And nothing ever worked. And one Sunday we were just kneeling, at the beginning at the Eucharistic prayer, we knelt down, and I set my son on the back of the pew in front of us. So he was sitting on the top of the backrest of the pew. And as I knelt, I just gave him a bear hug so he couldn't squirm away. And so his back was up against my chest. We're cheek to cheek. And as our parish priest raised the host, he just completely and immediately settled down, and his full attention went straight to the altar, and it stayed there for the rest of the Mass. Even because at that age we were bringing him up with us for communion, we weren't leaving him in the pew. So even as we brought him up to communion, he's staring at the altar, and we get back to the pew and his attention stayed there. And when we left Mass that Sunday morning, my wife and I just said, that was really cool. We should try that again and see if it works. So the next Sunday we went through the same routine, and we had the exact same results. So we continued to do this every week. And after weeks, month and a half at the most, but it wasn't a real long period of time. One Sunday, as I'm holding him, we're kneeling there, and he whispers back, and says, "Daddy, do you see the tornado?" And my response was, "No, I don't see a tornado. Where do you see a tornado?" And he pointed straight at the altar. So I'm like, no idea what thinks he's seeing, right? Every Sunday we continued the same routine, and from that point forward, every Sunday he would ask us if we can see the tornado. So after a few weeks of this, we left Mass. We're out in the parking lot, buckling him into his car seat. So my wife and I just asked him, "What does that tornado look like that you see in church?" And just very matter of factly, he said, "It's the angels coming down from the ceiling." And our response is, we want to see that tornado. When I got home, I don't know if it was that day or another Sunday, but obviously our curiosity is aroused, right? So I Googled angels at Mass just to see what I could find, and found out that there's a lot of saints who've had very similar experiences. And it's well documented. St. Augustine, St. Gregory, St. Bridget of Sweden, Blessed Henry Suso had an experience that he described almost exactly the way my son described it. And so it's like, this must be real. This
Yeah.
really must be real. Um, I also looked up in the catechism, what's an angel's purpose at Mass? Because this really got my curiosity going. In an angel's responsibility, it says, is to surround Christ the Lord, um, adore him, praise him, glorify him, and pray to him. That's their job. So if that's their job, and the Blessed Sacrament on the altar is truly Jesus, as we believe as Catholics that it is, it only makes sense to me that the church would be filled with angels.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
yeah. And for literally the next 20 years, I went to Mass looking for that tornado. I mean, that's the truth. I was hoping to someday see that.
So it was 20 years. It took a long time, but you eventually did have that personal encounter. Can you
Right.
bring us to that moment
I
and how
can.
it happened?
Yeah, it was February 25th of 2018. Um, and we were actually having a women's retreat at our parish that weekend. So we were, as part of our retreat, we set up a Eucharistic adoration chapel. So people from our retreat community who are not on the retreat spend time from the time the retreat starts on Friday night at 5 o'clock, or 7 o'clock rather, until 3 o'clock in the afternoon on Sunday. We have people around the clock in that adoration chapel, and then at the end of the retreat, as the women were going in to a classroom that we had set up as a chapel to have their Sunday Mass, we processed the Blessed Sacrament back over to church to repose the Blessed Sacrament in the tabernacle. But before reposing it, we did adoration, or a benediction rather. And I was leading the benediction. So I set the monstrance on the altar to begin benediction. And there were 9 other men there with me, and they were all kneeling in the front pews of the church right behind me. I was kneeling on the first step leading up to the altar in the sanctuary. So I was kneeling about 6 feet in front of the altar, and we actually played a recorded version of Matt Maher's song Adoration, which is the Tantum Ergo. And as the song began playing, I noticed something start spinning around the altar at a very high rate of speed. And I couldn't tell what it was, but there was definitely something there, and it was just sparkling. It's hard to describe, almost like cloudy, but I could see through it because I could see the monstrance. And it was spinning, and I'm looking, I'm not realizing what this is. And suddenly it stopped, and it began to spin in the opposite direction. And then it stopped again. And the entire altar was surrounded by angels. Mm. And I just recently read a description of, I don't remember the saint. I think it was Saint Teresa of Avila, but I could be wrong. Who described having seen angels, and she said it was a combination of fire and light. That was her description. And when I read that description, it was like, that's the best description I could give you. It was like a wavy, smoky, fiery kind of thing, but sparkling with light, just sparkling. And there were angels between me and the altar, and they were all the way around the altar, but I could see through them. I mean, I could physically see through them. I still could see the monstrance and the Blessed Sacrament on the altar. And they suddenly, as suddenly as they appeared, they began to sway back and forth to the rhythm of the music, as though they were dancing before the Lord. And I just started crying. I mean, I just sobbing. as I'm watching this. And it just, as soon as the song ended, they just disappeared. They were gone. And I'm kneeling there just literally sobbing, like heavy sobbing, crying. And I still had to pray the prayers of benediction, the divine praises, and all the other prayers. And I literally cried my way through them and reposed the Blessed Sacrament. And when we were done, the men who were there with me, they came up and asked me what was wrong, because obviously it was
Right.
pretty evident
They were
that I was crying.
concerned.
Yeah. And I explained to them what I had just seen, and none of them saw it. None of them experienced it. And the guys that were there with me, I mean, I think they truly believed me, and they gave me hugs and stuff. And one of the guys there, I just asked him, I go, what do I even do with this? And he said, you have to share it. That's what he told me right away. And as it turns out, I think that was pretty good advice. I ended up walking out into the parking lot behind church, and this is the end of February. It was cold. It was cold out, and I didn't have a coat on, and I'm out there leaned up against my car, and I'm just crying and trying to process what I had just experienced. And Father Mark Melez, the vocations director for the Diocese of Green Bay, was saying Mass for the women on retreat. He came out the side door of the school and saw me out there, and he walked over and asked me what was wrong. And I told him what I had just experienced in church. And Father Mark got this huge smile on his face and goes, do you realize how blessed you are? He said, every once in a while, God will pull back the veil just a little bit and give us a little glimpse of heaven. He said, you just experienced heaven on earth. And he gave me a big hug, and he hopped in his car and he drove away and left me out there crying, freezing. Yeah. I always say that because Father Mark has heard me do this presentations on this. He's a good friend, so it's like this little jab, but he always laughs about it too.
A fellow Wisconsinite helping another Wisconsinite out right there.
Yeah. But
wow.
That's 6 years ago, and it's still sometimes hard to process.
Yeah.
That's amazing. Wow. I mean, that's incredible that the Lord allowed you to see that, and to, like you said, he pulled back the veil and you saw reality for what it was. Like, so often at Mass, we can't see what's actually happening. And you were able to see during adoration just a little bit of what's really happening.
Right.
So do you still get distracted at Mass? Like, even though like you have seen part of the reality of what's happening, do you ever find yourself still distracted, and how do you deal with that distraction?
Unfortunately, I think that's a reality of our humanity.
Yes.
So I'd be lying if I said no, that I'm not distracted. I on occasions, but the truth is, I'm pretty focused during the Eucharistic.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I'm really focused, because the day after that happened, I went to Mass at St. Willibard's Catholic Church in downtown Green Bay, which is 3 blocks from where I had been working at the time.
It's a great church.
Yeah, so they have a noon Mass. So whenever I was in the office on a weekday, I would go down for their noon.
Oh yeah, we used to go there a lot. We used to live in Green Bay, so yeah.
I loved that 11:30 confession time.
Yes.
But so I'm there the day after I'd seen this, and I'm there, and I'm sitting in the pew, and the Eucharistic prayer starts, and I kneel down, and I'm looking for that tornado. I mean, I absolutely was looking for it the very next day, and I heard an audible voice. I mean, as clearly as I can hear my voice right now, and it was to me, it was an audible voice, and it said, "Dave, watch the Lamb. You don't come to Mass to worship angels. You come to Mass to worship my Son, the Lamb of God. Watch the Lamb. And from that day forward, I can honestly say this. My focus is on Jesus fully present on the altar during the consecration rather than looking for angels. The one downfall of me sharing my story is I've had people tell me they're looking for the angels, and that's not why I'm sharing it. And I understand why they would be looking, but that's not why I'm sharing it. I'm sharing it so that their focus is on Jesus fully present, body, blood, soul, and divinity right there on the altar in front of us.
And with your eyes gazed on the Eucharist, the Lord opened up a lot more opportunities for you to see the reality of the Eucharist. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. In fall of 2017, I was serving as deacon at Mass, and this was actually before I saw the angels. It was about 3 months before I saw the tornado. I was serving as deacon at Mass, and our priest at the time had a bottle that he would use at Mass, kind of a carafe, but more of a very narrow neck on the bottle, maybe about the diameter of a quarter rather than a wide mouth bottle. And he would have wine in that bottle, and he'd fill it up, a few inches of wine that he would place on the corporal during the consecration. And he would use that after the consecration, that would then be poured into the common cups to be shared at communion. And it was a Saturday 4:00 Mass at All Saints Church in Denmark. And I'm serving as deacon. And when the Eucharistic prayer began, I knelt off to the priest's right-hand side by the altar. And as the Eucharistic prayer began, I noticed there was a drop of liquid that ran down the inside of the neck of the bottle. And the neck on the bottle was probably a good, 6 or 7 inches long, and then opened into a wide, fairly round, wide bottom. So I see this drop run down the neck, and my initial thought is there must have been wine on the rim of the bottle. But then there was another drop, and pretty soon there's drops running down the neck of the bottle, all the way around the neck of the bottle, down into the wine. And the more I looked at it, the more I realized that doesn't look like wine. It looks like blood.
Yeah.
And I'm looking at this, and I just started crying. I'm kneeling there in front of a church full of people, and I'm crying. And as soon as the Eucharistic prayer was done, the drops just stopped. And then 2 hours later, 6:00 Saturday evening Mass at Holy Trinity Catholic Church in New Denmark, about 6 miles from southwest of Denmark. A different bottle, similar bottle, but the exact same thing happened. So I watched this happen twice within 2 hours, the exact same thing. And after seeing it happen the second time, there's no doubt in my mind that I was seeing the blood of our crucified Lord running down into that wine, changing it into his blood. So I actually had that experience before I saw the angels.
Wow.
And since having seen the angels, I've had on a few occasions, as the priest has raised the chalice at the consecration, I've seen heat waves come up out of the chalice. Yeah, heat waves, like intense heat waves, like you see above a fire or a candle, but just intense, coming out of the chalice all the way up to the ceiling of the sanctuary. And at both times, it's happened twice. And both times that it happened, it was at All Saints Catholic Church in Denmark, and the ceiling is probably 40 feet up, and it was heat waves all the way up to the ceiling until the priest placed the chalice back on the altar, and then they just went away. But as he elevated, and that has happened on 2 different occasions, actually a year and a day apart. One happened on it was January 1st of, I believe it was no, it was 2020, 2021, January 1st of 2021. And then a year later on January 2nd, it happened again.
That's incredible. That's just amazing that the Lord has given you this ability to see what is happening. And most people don't get that experience. Most people unfortunately don't even know what's happening. And sometimes people go to mass hoping to get something out of it, hoping that they can be fed, or they want to feel something. So what would you say to people who say they don't get anything out of mass?
Um, to me, and I've I've had this discussion, especially with high school kids
Sure.
when I talk to high school kids about the Eucharist, because when you ask high school kids if they go to mass and if they think it's boring, inevitably they're going to say mass is boring. And when you ask them why, they're going to tell you because I get nothing out of it.
Right. Right.
I can guarantee when I ask those questions, those are going to be the most common responses.
Yeah.
And my response to them, and it really is the response to everybody, is what do you bring to the mass?
Mm-hmm. Amen.
Um, we shouldn't go to mass to receive, although to receive the Eucharist, absolutely.
Yes.
But it's not about what do we get out of the mass. It's what are we giving? What are we bringing? Are we bringing our heart open to what's happening? Are we placing ourselves in a mindset to really fully participate? If you really understand what's happening on the altar, it shouldn't be boring, right? It shouldn't be boring.
Yeah.
And ultimately, especially when I talk to kids, and you talk about the things that I've experienced, at the end, because I'll usually start out asking them if mass is boring, that kind of thing. At the end of the talk, they'll tell me flat out, no, that's not boring. That's something that I want to experience.
Yeah.
So I really think it's important what we bring and how we approach the mass. The preparation we bring to the mass, I think, is critical.
Amen. Yeah. It's about changing our perspective, not only in our mind, but in our heart too.
Right.
Along with that perspective that, oh, mass is boring, I don't get anything out of it. There might also be that perspective that I'm not worthy to receive Jesus. Or the extreme side is that, well, because I haven't seen these things, because God hasn't allowed me to witness these miracles as you have, maybe someone might think, oh, it's because I'm such a sinner. It's because I'm so broken, or it's because of this or that. Can you speak to that person who is just so ashamed of their guilt and feels unworthy to approach the altar and receive Jesus after confessing their
Sure.
sin in confession?
We're all unworthy. We all are unworthy, right? I mean, we really are.
Mm-hmm.
Um, we're all sinners. We all bring baggage, right? But the one thing that I always tell people is remember what Jesus told Thomas: blessed are those who have not seen and yet believe. um, I think that's critical. I honestly think I think people who truly believe and have never seen anything, or have had experiences like I've had, they are blessed because their faith is strong to have that belief and not have to see to believe. Sometimes I think God needed to, hit me over the head with a 2x4 to really open my eyes. And there's a lot of people who he hasn't had to go to that extreme with them.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And you wrote a book about this, Deacon. How
Yeah.
can people get a copy of it, and what's it called?
It's called A Glimpse of Heaven on Earth. The title comes from Father Mark's words to me that afternoon that I saw the the angels around the altar. That's where the name of it came from. And it's available on Amazon, and it's also available if you're in the Diocese of Green Bay. It's available at the Cathedral Bookstore and at the St. Patrick's bookstore in Appleton, Wisconsin, as well.
Well, Deacon Dave, I think your story is just so important, and we're certainly praying for you and your ministry and everything that you do. And I think your story it is touching lives, and it has the potential to touch even more lives as time goes on. So just want to encourage you and affirm you in that. And I just appreciate you stepping out in faith, because it takes courage to share this, especially, I think Kathy and I both encounter people who might profess to believe in Jesus. They might be Protestant, right? But when it comes to the conversation on the Eucharist, it's, walls are down. Like they're not open to discussing this.
Walls are up.
Or sorry, walls are up. Yeah, walls are up.
Yeah.
They're not open to this possibility, and there's this unwillingness to really step out in faith. So I acknowledge that it takes a lot of courage to really have that faith to share. So thank you for doing that.
You're welcome. And it's interesting that you say that, because I've actually had some Lutherans who have been at some of my witness talks that have said, I have to really consider if I should be Catholic.
Wow.
Yeah.
If Jesus meant what he said in John chapter 6, that changes everything. And It's a matter of, I can't say that we can either believe or not believe in the true presence of the Eucharist. It's either real or it's not. And that's absolutely our faith.
Yep, that is our faith in a nutshell.
Yeah.
The bread of life discourse is our faith.
Right.
So we go to Mass.
Yeah, because you hear Christians say, well, yeah, we fundamentally believe in the same things. Yes, we believe in Jesus, but do you want to receive Jesus? Do you really take him at his word when he says, unless you eat my flesh and drink my blood, you have no life in you? And that right there is the dividing line that I think everybody needs to take a little bit more seriously, especially after the Eucharistic Congress. So in the final minutes to come here, Deacon, what was your impression of the Eucharistic Congress, and how can we take this zeal moving forward?
Right. It was absolutely amazing. And for me, it really did feel like the culmination of all of these experiences I've been having for years, all coming together at once at the Eucharistic Congress. Anybody who participated or has even seen video of the procession, I don't know how that can't just move you.
Yeah.
The speakers, we've been using the videos from the speakers for our religious ed program, because the speakers were amazing. They were absolutely amazing. So I'd encourage people, get on YouTube, just type in Eucharistic Revival. There's a lot of the talks out there available for you to see. But the adoration, those 4 nights of adoration, I've never experienced anything quite like that. And that's a pretty profound statement, because I've experienced some pretty cool things. But boy, that first night when they processed out with that monstrance, and that monstrance was huge.
Beautiful.
Because I think the host was about the size of a person's head. It was huge. They came out with that, and you're in the presence of whatever it was, 60,000 people in a stadium, and it instantly got dead quiet. I mean, the silence was deafening, and everybody dropped to their knees. I spent 4 nights, and it happened every night, all 4 nights, and I cried through the entire adoration. I just knelt there, and it was one of the most emotional things I've ever experienced in my life, and it was that way every night. So where do we go from here? I think the speakers very well established for us what we're supposed to do, right? Because they told us we can't stay here. We can't stay where we're at in our faith. We've got to go. We've got to go and take it out to others. Share the message of Jesus. Truly, present, body, blood, soul, and divinity in the Eucharist. Let people know that this is really Jesus. I love the line. I don't remember which speaker said it, and I just watched it the other night. It might have been Bishop Barron who said, "We got to go," and "go" is 2/3 of the name of God.
Oh, yeah.
Not sure if it was Bishop Barron.
Was it Chris Stefanik?
It might have been Chris.
Yeah.
I've been watching so many of these with religious ed kids. They start to mix up in my head. I think it was Chris. Now that you say that, yeah. So that's been kind of the calling card for me.
Yeah.
We have to go out and share it.
And that's the mass, to be sent.
Right.
We're on mission, not just to gather at the altar, but to go and to bring our brothers and sisters away from the faith back to church. So,
and that's my role as a deacon.
Right. Yeah, absolutely.
Is to announce that you go and proclaim the Lord with your life.
So let's take that call more seriously and really take that to heart too in our own lives. Well, Deacon, again, your book, A Glimpse of Heaven on Earth. And we really appreciate you taking the time to share your story with us, and we'll be praying for you.
Okay, well, thank you both very much.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much.